Hello and welcome to Films and That. My name's Rob Turnbull.
And my name's Sam Hall.
And today we are doing one of our director special episodes and we're looking at Krzysztof Kieślowski.
Yes, and we're not focusing on his documentary work, TV work or shorts. We're doing his feature films, but we're also including in that the Decalogue, which was a TV series, but I think it's just too important really to miss out.
Yeah, and the reason we're looking at Krzysztof Kieślowski is that he's a real master of social realist drama, and he was at the top of his game when he died.
Yeah, so it was a real tragedy really that we lost him at such a...
At his peak, really.
Yeah, his peak, yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's take a look. Born in 1941 in Warsaw, Poland, Krzysztof Kieślowski got his start making documentary films after attending film school in Łódź. This review contains spoilers. His first kind of chunk of work was shorts, documentaries and things like that. So following people around, filming them and then kind of creating a narrative from that. We're not going to cover his documentary films too much here, but it's important to know that that's how he got his start, and that does play a part in the films he made later on. It's very realistic, a lot of his work, isn't it?
It certainly, it's not just that, it kind of shaped his viewpoint as well on filmmaking, I think, because making documentaries in a communist country is incredibly frustrating if you're an artist.
Yeah.
You're just making government propaganda. You're completely restrained in what you can do. It's no wonder really that he became disillusioned with documentary filmmaking as well. Someone like Kieślowski needs all artistic freedom.
Yeah.
And that really sort of comes out, I think, in some of his films.
Well, this is I read that this is why he went into drama rather than documentaries, because his films were getting censored quite heavily because they were touching on subjects that, you know, the powers weren't too happy with him touching on. So he decided to, well, let's just do it fictional then, because then I won't get censored because it's not going to be too close to the truth. But we'll get into that a bit later. He does get a bit more censored still.
So he abandoned his documentary work sort of in the early 70s, I believe.
Yeah, so I think he kind of, it was a gradual change. So he kind of did some narrative work for TV while he was doing documentary films. And then he kind of slowly moved towards just doing narrative films, basically. We're going to split this up into like 3 chunks. So his first chunk of films, we're looking at The Scar, Camera Buff, No End and Blind Chance. So first off, The Scar, which is the first one of these films we're looking at, that is a very much, it's like someone made a documentary, but it was a fictional documentary. It's very much, you know, you're on the fly on the wall, you're kind of looking over people's shoulders, you're just in the room with them.
It was one of these later films that I saw, but it's obviously one of his earliest films, and I really struggled to sort of latch onto it on a human level. On a visual level, I think you can see the beginnings of someone who clearly has an eye, you know, for cinematography.
Yeah, he's definitely, he's a good director of actors, I think. But you can really see his transition here from doing documentary work to narrative work, that it's not quite a narrative film, is it? It's basically a fake documentary.
Yeah, in a nutshell, it's about someone who's assigned to make a factory in his hometown. He's sort of disillusioned from the whole thing from the start, and then he sort of gets kicked off it because of the powers that be. But the moments that sort of stand out for me are things like there's a moment when he's looking out the window and he's switching the light on and off. Or even actually the very last moments in the credits of it when he's playing with this child. Those are the moments for me that really stood out. I don't know if that's a personal thing, but the story itself I just couldn't get into it.
There's a lot of political stuff that just, to be honest, went over my head. I didn't really understand what was going on a lot of the time. But he did focus on the humanity of it. So like the thing when he's playing with his child, that's when he's happy again, because he's kind of given up the job, hasn't he? So he's kind of, you know, got rid of all the political bullshit. Now he's just focusing on what's important. And that's something that Kieślowski does a lot, is really focus on an individual within a community. Yeah. And this does reflect that. And what I liked about this film is that the character he's always trying to help people. You know, he's always trying to see from other people's point of view. Like they're trying to knock down someone's house. to build some more houses or something at one point, and the guy doesn't want to leave, but he's trying to work with him and work with the other people to kind of find the solution.
Niech pan zejdzie. Niech się pan uspokoi, widzi pan, już zatrzymałem robotę. Nie wpuszczę! No mówię wam!
If there was one word to describe Kieślowski films for me, it's compassion. And that really does run through the character in here.
Certainly, and unfortunately for him, he's the figurehead of this whole thing. He's the person that the people see who are against this building of this factory. So he garners a lot of hatred because of that. But in the end, he sort of throws off the shackles and sort of becomes one of them. If you know what I mean? He literally does that. Doesn't become embroiled in the sea of people and says, "Look, I'm on your side." So I guess that, in a way, that's also sort of the beginnings of this, what could be called a political side to Kieślowski.
Yeah. So he has been criticised for being a political filmmaker, and he's always denied it, basically, hasn't he? Which it's really interesting to see where your opinions lie on that, because I don't think he's a political filmmaker, but I think you do you?
No, I think there's something to be said of it. I think there's something to be said that he was, having worked in a communist dictatorship, it's much better to work than it is to be in prison or be blacklisted or whatever. And I think he got into the habit of saying, "I'm not a political filmmaker," and it just became a sort of natural defense mechanism.
Wszyscy mieliśmy świadomość tego, co można, a czego nie można, i wszyscy, prawdę mówiąc, mieliśmy ochotę, żeby grać z tym, co można, a co nie można, inaczej mówiąc, żeby się ciągle znajdować gdzieś na krawędzi noża, żeby nie spaść w tą stronę, w której już jakby w której nie ma odwrotu, żeby też nie dać się cenzurze, to znaczy, żeby nie spaść w coś, co już nic nie znaczy.
But I don't think he necessarily sees himself as fundamentally a political filmmaker at the same time. Whereas you think of someone like Ken Loach, everything about his films, even the ones with human elements, they're always having a dig at some government somewhere.
Whereas Kieślowski's more about the people.
Yeah.
It's like he's looked around in the community he's living in and he's just telling those human stories, and they happen to be political sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's just that politics is a part of life, really, rather than these films were made to make a statement.
Yeah, I agree, actually.
Gówno mnie obchodzi społeczeństwo. Że społeczeństwo to jest w wypadku polskim 40 milionów pojedynczych ludzi. I że tak naprawdę co mnie obchodzi, to pojedynczy człowiek.
And his next film, Camera Buff, that's a very personal film, I feel. I feel he put a lot of himself into that film.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I'd be very surprised if there wasn't something of that in his film. I'm almost watching it as if it was an autobiography.
Yeah.
It's not the same story of his life, admittedly. The story of the film is a man buys a camera to film his child growing up.
Yeah.
And then somebody finds out, basically, at his job and says, "We want you to make a video for us." He goes from wanting a simple life to becoming, almost by accident, embroiled in this world of filmmaking and celebrity, and he ends up meeting like famous Polish filmmakers and things like that.
Yeah, and he kind of bumbles his way to success, really, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like he never even tries to be successful. He just kind of like he has a passion for it, but other people come in and go, "Oh yeah, I want you to do this with this," and you go, "Oh, okay, I'm doing that now." So it's kind of, there's a double side to there's that tragedy there of him not spending time with his wife and child because he's off doing this other thing, but there's also a kind of humour there, kind of lightheartedness. It's a real kind of balance in tone, which I think Kieślowski does really well.
And probably the most important moment of the film is the moment when he turns the camera on himself to represent Kieślowski's disillusionment with documentary filmmaking, turning it on himself as in sort of becoming an auteur, I suppose.
The character in the film does get kind of censored and he's told not to do that. We want you to take this bit out of the film and put those things together, and he's like, "I don't want to do that."
And the more interesting things of this is that he finds he has consequences to people he knows.
Oh yeah.
He wants to be as artistic as possible, but because of doing that, he ends up getting a friend fired from his job, and he just has to sort of live with it. There's nothing he can do about it.
That's when he realises that his work has impact. He's not just doing it for himself anymore. He goes out and destroys one of his films because he doesn't want it to get out into the world.
I think there was so much in this film like that I mean, I really related to it. You know, even though I'm not a famous filmmaker, but I really related to it, and it sort of ended up becoming one of my favourites, I think, overall.
Well, yeah, this is really interesting because this feels like what I feel a Kieślowski film is, whereas The Scar felt not like that at all. So he's gone from doing almost entirely documentary to flipping around to doing something that I recognise as his style. This is where he found his style, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And it's also very difficult, I think, to transition from one discipline to the other. So I feel he really had to sort of metamorphosize between Scar and Camera Buff to get to that point where he realises, you know, the techniques involved and the filmmaking involved in making fiction film.
Yeah, but it's a good start, though. Like, I'm struggling to think of another director where their first drama film is as competent as this, really. I mean, obviously the documentary work has had him, you know, building his skill set from there.
Kieślowski clearly had the opportunity to really work at the craft before he gave fiction film a go.
I know that he rehearsed a lot and that he only shot like one take at a time, and then he was like, oh yeah, let's move on to the next take. So I think he did that because of the cost of film stock and like the limitations. Didn't have a lot of money at the time. Everything he learned from following people around and only having one take to do it was then, you know, that paid off when he came to make drama. No End. Something I wanted to mention about No End is that I really like how kind of psychotic some of the posters for the film are. Like, does that represent the film? A lot.
That's awesome, but
yeah, it looks like something from H.R. Giger, you know, the Necronomicon. But it's not that at all. It's a film about a woman whose husband dies.
Umarłem 4 dni temu.
He was a lawyer, so his wife is then involved in picking up work and kind of figuring out what's going on with the case he was involved in. And it's told from the perspective of the dead husband. So he's following her around. There's a lot of legalese in No End, lots of trial, litigation, words and stuff like that. So Krzysztof Kieślowski brought in Krzysztof Kieślowski to consult with him on this script. So Kieślowski is a lawyer.
Yeah.
And this started his collaboration with Kieślowski. So from this film to his end work, Kieślowski worked on every script from that. So it's a real kind of partnership here.
How many times do you think lawyers go from that kind of work into art? Yeah. I know Bob Mortimer started as a lawyer.
But I think that really kind of adds a level of realism and truth to Kieślowski's work.
Yeah, one thing you really get a sense of with Kieślowski is his dedication to being accurate. It's like they bring an extra dimension of intellect into the whole thing.
Zareska nie będzie zeznawać, panie mecenasie.
Czemu?
Wyjechała za granicę, nie wiadomo czy wróci.
Natychmiast do więzienia.
Adding real things that happen in real life are always going to make your film stronger, no matter what kind of genre it is, you know. And it is a partnership that really works, I think. So what did you think to No End, like on the whole as a film?
I thought it was fine. It was difficult for me to relate to it, I think, because there's not a lot of stuff in there that I could relate to.
Characters are very honest about how they feel, which becomes a Kieślowski trait. At one point, someone says to the main character, you don't care about this at all, do you? You don't care about other people, you just care about what's happening to you. And she's like, yeah, to be honest, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I only care about myself.
Ciebie to nic nie obchodzi, prawda? Patrzysz na te nieszczęścia i myślisz, że twoje jest ważniejsze. Tak. Masz rację. Tak.
If you're comparing this to like social realist drama from, you know, the UK, for instance, we suffer from a lot of kind of what I call get out of my pub mentality.
Dirty rotten bitch! Get out of my pub right now!
kind of melodrama of, you know, someone says something slightly offensive. Oh yeah, it's a big thing. You know, we're going to make a big deal out of it, and you kind of everyone shouts at everyone else. But in this, it's very calm. Everyone's just kind of dealing with their emotions and like talking to each other like adults.
Wczoraj zrobiłam coś złego. Co? Coś złego. Zdradziłam Antka. Przecież go nie ma. Cały czas myślę, dlaczego ja mu to zrobiłam.
You bitch! You kill!
Well, although Kieślowski is not a political filmmaker, he did associate with a lot of filmmakers that were political at the time and were considered controversial. During the period between August 1980 and December 1981, there was a very brief sort of reprieve where the censors just said, right, okay, we're just going to let everyone go free and make what they want. And so then everybody made films that were really critical about the communist regime. And they said, right, okay, no, stop that now.
It is worth pointing out that Blind Chance was made in 81, I believe.
Yeah.
And it took about 6 years to actually get released for the political kind of undertone of it, which Kieślowski has denied.
This is a film that was heavily censored, and they sort of managed to scramble it back together, but it ended up becoming quite important, really, for his career and in terms of how he influenced people.
Yeah, so this is probably one of his most political films, though.
Yeah.
Tylko właśnie dlatego nie mogła uwierzyć, że ja też jestem przeciwko partii i przeciwko komunizmowi i przestała wierzyć partii.
It's about a character who... It shows 3 different points in his life, so the same thing happening if he had made different choices. And in each of these different choices, he goes down a different political path. What I took from it was that it was showing how you can be swayed into different political arguments. It doesn't matter where you started from. If you meet someone on a train who's a communist, you then go down their belief system and then become a communist yourself. That was...
Or the opposite, or whatever, you know, but that's kind of the point it's making, isn't it? Yeah. A moment can completely change who you are.
These 3 things happen based on whether he gets a train or not. And just like seemingly inconsequential things then have a massive impact on how you live your life.
We see him from being either side of the coin.
Yeah.
And being anti-communist, religious at one point, and apolitical as well.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
And it never ends well for him, no matter what he does.
Yeah.
It's incredibly pessimistic.
Wjechała do Łodzi.
This kind of idea of, you know, we're seeing the same character from 3 different time periods, that was something that I don't think I'd seen before this, but you see it in like Sliding Doors, which was inspired by this, and then Run Lola Run was inspired by this as well. This kind of seemingly small film from a Polish filmmaker, you know, 30, 40 years ago, kind of has this lasting impact on filmmakers, and then they become more mainstream. So it is, that kind of really cements him in film history, I think, at this point.
And also the bowling episode in Malcolm in the Middle.
I love bowling!
Kieślowski's next chunk of films that we're looking at is the short film about killing, short film about love, and the Decalogue, which is a collection of TV movies, 10 of them, each following kind of the ideas behind the 10 Commandments, or the general themes. And we should mention that a short film about killing and a short film about love, they are kind of adaptations of 2 of these Decalogue pieces.
I think it's worth sort of talking about these separately anyway. The Decalogue on the whole is pretty good, but a short film about killing, it just has such a significant message.
Wykonać wyrok.
It's a lot more cinematic, whereas the rest of the Decalogue is more kind of TV, I would have said.
Everything down to the odd colorization.
Yeah.
which is the most striking thing about it.
And like heavy vignettings and things like that.
Yeah.
My personal impression is that a short film about killing was made first, and then that was cut down to an hour to then put in the decalogue. You know, scenes are just missing, they're just lifted out of it. So like a scene in a killing would be like 5 minutes long, and then in decalogue it'd be 30 seconds long. Whereas with a short film about love, that feels like it was intended to be distributed for both decalogue and the film side of it while they were shooting.
Yeah, you can get the sense you can watch both. You can watch one or the other and still get the message.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily like missing scenes, it's just scenes are different.
Czy mógłbym panią zaprosić do kawiarni?
They definitely did shoot different scenes. You know, if you look at their footage, it's different takes. So it's weird. It's like they had a different mindset when shooting a short film about love than they did when they shot a short film about killing. It's really difficult to get your head around how that happened, but I think we should just talk about the two films first and like what happens in them.
The short film about killing is about one character is a murderer. We don't quite understand the motivations.
Yeah, he starts out just kind of being a bit of a punk, really, and going around, you know, spitting on cars and like throwing stones at things and generally just breaking laws just for the sake of it seems. So he doesn't really seem, you don't get a sense of who he is at that point. He's just a prick, isn't he?
Yeah.
This kind of gets more and more severe and he ends up killing a man, which is an incredibly horrific scene.
Yeah, very, very memorable, quite brutal killing.
One of the most brutal killings I've seen in a film.
It's because of its length, isn't it? Of how long it goes on for, I think, is what's shocking about it.
Yeah, and I feel it really gets to the kind of heart of the brutality of murder. Like, if you see a film where someone gets shot, like Indiana Jones or something like that,
yeah, humorous.
Yeah.
You know?
But the reality of killing someone must be horrible. And like, doesn't he strangle him and then he doesn't die and then he has to like hit him with a rock and it just goes on forever.
Yeah, my dad has a similar story about a turkey he killed for Christmas once. But so yeah, to actually kill someone there in the moment, it's a long protracted process, surely, and then you've got to dispose of it and stuff, you know.
Yeah, and like at one point in the middle of the killing, he sees someone like cycling along or something, so he kind of hides and waits a bit, and it's not quick, is it? It's not just, oh yeah, I'm hitting him over the head and then I run off. You have to be committed to it. And that's what's more tragic, I think. That's what's more horrendous, is how he never changes his mind and never thinks, oh God, what am I doing? He just keeps going because he can't go back.
Oh, yes.
And then the flip side of that is that it then becomes a commentary on the morality of executions, essentially.
It's not just about, oh, you know, this man killed someone. It's also about this state is then going to kill this person. So the government at this point is doing the same thing. You know, it's kind of being quite ruthless and it's drawing the process out and it's being quite committed to the horrendousness of killing a person. It's really showing a mirror to the society that, you know, Kieślowski was in at that point.
Yeah, which I think is why it makes it perhaps, I wouldn't say it's my favourite episode, but it is the most powerful episode, objectively speaking, I think. And if we talk about a short film about love, I didn't have quite the same impact. Well, of course it didn't. The main premise of that is that a young man is is a peep, a peeping Tom.
It's a rear window, but a sexy one, basically.
Yeah. He's looking out the window with his telescope and perving on this woman who's clearly older than him, a lot more experienced. He gets caught, obviously, because that's how you make the story interesting, and she decides to sort of play around with him and gets turned on by it herself.
Well, this is what's interesting. Usually you'd see, these characters confronting each other. One would get angry at the other and start shouting, and calling the police and kind of being all dramatic about it. And that's the sort of thing a lesser screenwriter would do. But Kieślowski, what he does in this, he has the characters confront each other and she's quite understanding about him and she's more intrigued by it. She doesn't fly off the handle.
Osaczyłeś mnie. Przynosisz mleko, nasyłasz gazowników. Wzywasz mnie na pocztę. Kradniesz listy. Kradniesz! A właściwie to nie ma znaczenia. Nie masz jakichś przyjaciół?
Well, that's more interesting, isn't it? It's more interesting to unpack that idea than it is to have these people argue at each other, and that really shows his merit as a screenwriter, I think.
And then the flip side of that, again, as similarly with the short film like Killing, the flip side of this is that it turns out this young man had a kind of mental difficulties. He ends up trying to commit suicide and has to go to hospital as a result. But she sort of becomes him. she becomes obsessed with him, and she's trying to look for him all the time, all of a sudden now. And she sort of blames herself for it, I suppose.
And interestingly, the different versions of this, a short film about love ends with the kind of like hope that they'll get back together. Whereas the decalogue version, she goes to meet him and he's like, I don't look at you out the window anymore, I'm over you, basically.
Ja już pani nie podglądam.
I think the ending for the film is better, to be honest. It's more heartfelt and it's more getting at the heart of the emotion of love. But Kieślowski does go down the route of trying to find something that everyone can relate to, rather than doing a film about communism and then some people aren't communists, some people hate communism, some people are communists. Politics and things like that divides people. Whereas love, everyone feels love and everyone knows what love is about. And that is what Kieślowski is trying to capture. The kind of core of what makes a human and showing how different people can feel the same things. So this brings us on to Decalogue, which I think is one of Kieślowski's best pieces of work. It's quite ambitious to do basically what are 10 films, 10-hour-long films. Kieślowski was meant to get different directors to direct each one of these Decalogue pieces, but in the end he just decided to do it all himself and get different DOPs.
I still feel like with the cinematography with Kieślowski, though, that there is a signature thing there, and I think that he is quite a talented cinematographer himself.
Each one of these films in the Decalogue, it feels like it's part of a complete body of work, doesn't it? It's not like one feels out of place. The only one that might feel a bit out of place is the Killing adaptation.
Just because of the way it looks, I suppose.
Yeah. But the rest of them, it feels like they're made with a consistent tone, style. Kieślowski's signature slow pans are there. It does feel complete.
The other big thing, I guess, that connects all these films, that they're all set within sort of the same apartment block.
It's looking at a community, isn't it? So this building filled with loads of people, get one person who's a lecturer, one person who's a doctor, whole range of different people with their own individual stories.
Słucham? Tak, Anka. Zaraz, chwileczkę. Tato, odłóż telefon, ja odbiorę w twoim pokoju.
Tak.
Odłożył?
Odłożył.
Odłożyłeś? Tato!
Odłożył.
Each one of these is based on the Ten Commandments, but really a very loose adaptation of the Ten Commandments. And a lot of the Ten Commandments, there aren't 10, are there? There's 6 at most. Let's be honest. There's some duplicates in there.
Yeah. It's kind of like, was it Kieślowski's commandment in a way? It's the way that he approaches it. When you take the first one, for example, It's kind of a tragic story about a father and son who take a lot of stock in the science of ice skating, and they see there's a lake nearby that the son wants to ice skate on. He's convinced he's got the science right, the ice will not break, and then there's quite a tragic ending to that, unfortunately. So the message there would be sort of don't take too much stock in science over God, but I don't think it's necessarily saying, it's not anti-science.
No.
That's not what Kieślowski is, you know. It's more about not taking too much stock into things and not dedicating yourself outright to it. But that's a kind of loose connection there, and there's kind of a similar thing going throughout each episode. None of them, they're not making a huge statement about the commandment. You know?
They're not being preachy at all.
Yeah, it's not like a Hallmark film or whatever, or something like that.
Yeah, you could watch these films and you don't necessarily get a sense that Kieślowski is religious at all from this. Not necessarily. I mean, he might be, but there's no sense of, you know, you should believe in God, you should do this. You know, these people are punished because they made these moral decisions that are inconsistent with religion or Catholicism in particular. But it's more about this compassion thing that's coming back. It's all about how these people deal with these moral situations and how that itself is interesting.
Tymczasem myśmy pomyśleli o tym, żeby postawić każde z tych przykazań dekalogu jako pewnego rodzaju wyzwanie dla człowieka. I czy człowiek jest w stanie temu wyzwaniu sprostać?
One of the early ones was about a wife who cheated on her husband and was pregnant. Her husband had cancer and was going to die. And she was like asking the physician, the doctor, you know, I need to make a decision now. Should I have an abortion and stay with this person? But if he dies, you know, I will have the child. So it's about this doctor having this, you know, knowledge that whatever decision he makes, he's got the life of the child in his hands, basically. He kind of refuses to make that decision.
Ale ja w moim życiu widziałam zbyt wielu ludzi, którzy powinni byli umrzeć, a mimo to żyli. I takich, którzy umierali bez powodu.
That's how he's taken the words, thou shalt not take the Lord of God in vain. He's taken that as being how important speech is, and then gone on that to a human level, how your words can have a lasting impact on people. Thou shalt not steal was, thou shalt not steal your estranged daughter from
your mother.
Your over-controlling mother.
Yeah.
Się dowie. Udowodnię.
Nic nie udowodnisz. Ania jest moja. Jest zapisana jako moje dziecko, tylko Jadwiga wie, że to ty ją urodziłaś, ale nigdy nie powie.
She does have a right to her daughter in a way.
The child sees the grandmother as her mother. So for all intents and purposes, she is her mother. So it's like neither of those people are wrong there. They're not, you know, it's not a sense of you shouldn't kill people or you definitely shouldn't kill people. It's like they both are entitled to, you know, that relationship with the daughter. So it's about that difficult decision, and that's what interesting drama is all about, when two parties aren't wrong, they're just different.
Masz, tutaj. Nawet tu masz.
A, tutaj mam kropkę fantastyczną. Tak?
I quite liked that one when she went to visit the father of the child. He, you know, slept with her when she was underage. Obviously never really had spent much time with the daughter, but he's saying he's a wizard and he's kind of making her laugh and stuff like that. It's just quite a little sweet moment, I think, that bit.
Yeah, and then hanging over that, you know, he did have underage sex.
Well, this is it.
So, you know, it can't help it. Yeah, I mean, he's not afraid to sort of tread into these little moral questions. Maybe give you answers that sort of standard morals wouldn't allow, I suppose, you know.
Yeah, because you go into that thinking, oh, you know, this guy's a paedophile, he should be, he's a horrible person. And the film just doesn't go down that route at all. He's quite compassionate towards him and his situation. And she was 16 at the time, which I don't know what the age of consent in Poland was, but that's kind of okay here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's frowned upon, but
it's
not necessarily illegal, I don't think.
So with Kieślowski films, there's no baddie, is there? There's no antagonist. It's more just people living out their lives and the struggles that have been placed upon them.
I think there's something to be said there. Because going back briefly to politics, he talks about politics as being this thing that's it's a way to mess up lives in a way. It's a way because human beings, because we're flawed, and we create these systems that are imperfect in their very nature. It's not humans necessarily that are evil. It's kind of the ideas and the systems in place and the things that we cherish. These are the things that create problems. It's situations rather than necessarily people. Everybody believes that they're right, you know. So it's difficult to sort of go into every situation and say that somebody is fundamentally evil, because nobody really is to themselves, you know.
There's no such thing as good or evil, really.
In Kieślowski's world, anyway.
Yeah, and that's what makes it interesting going down. You know, the 10 Commandments are a list of things which are good and evil, basically, aren't they?
Yeah.
So to take that and unpack it and then kind of say, well, hold on a minute, you know, this isn't how life is. You know, people do bad things for good reasons.
That is just sort of like the tenet of every good script, I guess.
Yeah.
But the way that he approaches it and the way he does it in such an intelligent way and a way that feels unique, I think is one of the things that's one of his biggest strengths.
Proszę cię. Proszę cię, powiedz mi. Mamo, słyszysz? No powiedz. Mamo. Mamo.
Oh, this one was good. This false witnesses on your neighbour. This was my favourite one out of the decalogue, I think. You start off, you get this lecturer. She's teaching about moral dilemmas. Someone tells a story about her past, about how when she was younger in the war, she was Jewish and she went to someone who was going to save her from the Nazis, basically. But then they turned her down and kind of gave her away. And it turns out that the lecturer was involved in that decision 50 years ago.
And then they're trying to come to how they would do that, you know, and it was the main one thing would be out of fear.
The lecturer kind of reveals later on that they believed that her parents were involved with the Gestapo. So she kind of didn't send them to the underground resistance because there was that fear that they would be discovered and then more people would have died from that situation.
To pani. Tak, to ja. I pani żyje. Myślałam całe życie. Ile razy widzę kogoś, kto bawi się złotym łańcuszkiem, myślę sobie, Boże, żyje pani.
What really touched me was the end bit when she goes to see the parents that would have adopted her but didn't in the end, and the guy just doesn't want to talk to her, and she keeps trying to talk to him and he's just trying to sell her a coat or something because he's like, I don't want to talk about the war, sorry. And she's trying to keeps giving him a bit more information. She just keeps trying and it's just really heartbreaking.
Pan miał mnie uratować. Chciałam podziękować za to, że pan chciał.
Ma pani swój materiał? Bo teraz to tak trudno, wie pani, coś kupić.
Eventually she just leaves. She's like, you don't want to talk about this at all? He's like, okay, I'm leaving. And then the guy goes up to the window and he sees her with the elderly woman and realises who she is at that point. And it's just, that's when the film ends. That's a brilliant ending, I think. The next one. So this is thou shall not have erection problems, basically.
Yeah, a man becomes impotent. His wife tells him that she will always love him, but there's obviously been on the cards for a while because she's already had a lover, I think. And now he's just sort of saying, okay, well, just, you know, if you need sexual gratification, then go out and get it, you know. But he can't live with that.
No, and he basically follows her, he kind of bugs her phone, all these things that are considered morally abhorrent, but then this husband is doing this to his wife. He just needs to know, doesn't he? Even though it's going to bring him pain. He knows the truth of it, he just needs to see it. He even ends up hiding in the room at one point, which is a bit creepy. But again, you get the sense of why he's doing it. They do work to build a relationship together even after that point.
Forcing you to sort of confront these things that, you know, sort of subjects that you'd probably rather not talk about or think about. The thought of somebody becoming impotent isn't a pleasant thought. And they sort of say, you know, is that going to ruin their marriage or whatever? And quite often it probably does, you know. In this case, the humanist side comes out and they try and work around it.
Yeah. It's probably how he rides his bike, though. That's probably what happened. That'll be it. That's why you've done that.
I have heard this before, yeah. Riding bikes causes impotence or numbness.
The last one is about stamps. I thought this one was a bit crap.
Brutally honest.
Well, this one is more farcical than the rest, which is a bit of an odd, like, tonal shift.
You're so used to classical music with Kieślowski, and suddenly we've got an 80s punk band who is meant to be sort of these two brothers whose father has just passed away.
No a ile to jest warte tak wszystko?
Dziesiątki milionów.
And there's a whole kind of betrayal between the two brothers of everything's been stolen and they're trying to determine who it is and they start to suspect each other.
But it's just this idea of this criminal underground of stamp collectors. It was just a bit silly, I thought.
Yeah. Oh yeah, is that connected into the Holocaust episode?
Pokazać.
Piękne.
That's the brother's father.
Yeah.
And he's the one that dies and leaves the stamps. So yeah, that's the interconnected thing is something that, I don't know, Marvel does now. You know, this kind of cinematic universe of having multiple bodies of work that all link into each other somehow. And it kind of makes you more interested about the whole picture, I think. So you watch them all going, oh yeah, you know, he's from there and there, and it kind of clicks in your head and you kind of get this moment of delight when you realise they connect in that way.
Yeah. Like when you've just finished a Lego set.
So music plays a big part in a decalogue. There's not a lot of music in there, but what is in there is quite well crafted, and it's all done by this guy Zbigniew Preisner, who Kieślowski works with quite a lot.
And interestingly, they collaborated about the same time as Pisevich.
Yeah, so you've got this kind of like trio of creative people working on these projects together, and when you have someone that is clearly committed to creating good quality on, you know, individual aspects of a project, that's when the whole project gets lifted in quality.
To create music, not just to emote and, you know, not just after the fact, but sort of create it before the film, to actually make it part of the story I think is something that's quite, probably quite difficult to do and to make it good anyway, you know.
Yeah, and my general opinion on music is that good music is what makes films great. You know, you've got great visuals, great storytelling, but if you don't have a good soundtrack or, you know, good audio, you don't have a good film. You really need that other part, and that's something a lot of people don't really even think about. So it's good that Kieślowski has that, you know, tool to use, I think. So Decalogue was how Kieślowski got his international success, basically.
Yeah.
And following on from this, he got a lot of funding from France to make his next couple of films.
If you wanted to work in America, generally, you know, especially if you're a European, Eastern European filmmaker, you have to sort of toe the line a bit. And I don't think Kieślowski was willing to do that. I think he needed the creative freedom that France would give him.
Jeżeli udaje mi się w każdym etapie pracy nad scenariuszem i w każdym etapie pracy nad filmem zbudować, skonstruować jakąś całość. Wszystko jedno, że ta całość jest króciutka, czy jest dłuższa, czy jest bardzo długa. Za każdym razem udaje mi się, z powodów tego, że mnie do tego zmuszają, udaje mi się mieć całość.
And the next 4 films we're looking at are The Double Life of Veronique and the 3-colour trilogy, Blue, White and Red. So these represent the colours of the French flag, apparently, and the kind of ideals of the French flag.
Again, loose connection to the ideals of the French flag, liberty, equality and fraternity. Not really about that. It's as if he has a little spider diagram where he writes the word in the middle and then, you know, writes off other themes and then takes one of those themes and makes a film out of that.
I did read as well that Kieślowski said the only reason he did that was because it was made in France, and it's France money. And if it was made in another country, it would be the ideals of another country, but the films would have been the same.
Yeah.
So he basically was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I can totally see that. What came first? Was it The Double Life of Veronique?
Yeah, so that was 1991. So what happens in this is, again, this idea of coincidence and chance. There's 2 people that they look the same and they seem to be connected somehow, but they live in different parts of the world.
One sort of finds out about the other in a way, or they both sort of almost for a brief moment acknowledge each other's existence.
Yeah.
As if it's sort of passing on the torch. But one has a promising but tragic existence. Her life is cut short.
From chronic boob pain.
Okay.
This is an odd one. I don't really know how to describe it. There's not really a sense of a plot, is there? It's not like, oh, this happened, so we need to react to this. It's just, what happens if these 2 people existed?
Yeah, I did like it.
Yeah.
His background clearly informed his style of filmmaking that is not quite something you'd expect from other disciplines. And I think that could be another reason maybe why he went to France, because I feel that a French filmmaking discipline would be more likely to sort of allow that kind of film. Even independent American films generally have a very grand sense of narrative. They're not very postmodern. They tend to stick to these grand narratives of good and evil and right and wrong. He must have had a much bigger team for these French films.
He's able to play around with the colours, you know, in the sets. He's able to kind of tint things a bit more.
Be more creative as well. It is more visual, his French films, but visual in the European sense again. You know, it's about what you see, not about effects. Even at the opening of Bleu, for example, you see the reverse of a car tunnel as you're looking through the back of a car window. It's a very interesting sort of visual feat, and you almost sat there thinking, how did he achieve that? But it's dreamlike and
it's almost abstract, isn't it? In a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
just a precursor to what will happen in a moment, you know. But you don't get quite as much of that in his Polish films. I feel like they're a lot more conversational.
One of the decalogue pieces which we didn't talk about was about 2 people in one location talking, basically. There's no real visual stimulus there. And it is engaging on the script level. But then you go to something like Blue, and there's so much in there that I was scribbling down notes when I was writing. Oh, there's a bit of blue there, you know, that means this, you know, that kind of visual connection to the story is just so much stronger. So the plot of Blue is Juliette Binoche. Her husband and daughter die in a car accident right at the beginning of the film. And it's just her trying to come to terms with their death, basically. She never really cries at all. She's just kind of really solemn. Her reaction to her husband dying is just to get rid of anything that resembles him at all. There's a room that is blue where he did all his work. And so blue becomes a symbol of him. And so whenever she's thinking about him, we see some blue splashes of colour here and there. She's kind of fighting the grief, really. She's not coming to terms with his death. She's just trying to avoid it in the most drastic way possible.
I think there is an element of her trying to confront it as well, but sort of feeling like unsuccessful. For example, she eats this sort of blue lollipop that her daughter was eating when they had a crash. There's nothing on her face, you know, after she eats it, no sense of pleasure or joy or grief or anything. It's like she's sort of deliberately trying to to force feelings that aren't there. She also sort of like runs her hand against a wall to try and scrape it, you know, as if she's saying like, I want to feel something, anything, but she just can't get that sense of grief out of her. You know?
It's very powerful, isn't it? There's a great line when her maid is crying or something. She's like, why are you crying? She's like, because you're not.
Yeah.
Vous pleurez. Parce que vous ne pleurez pas.
Her husband is a composer, so the music becomes an incredibly important thing for how it represents him. Someone says something and she gets really angry and says no, and then it cuts to black.
Vous me demandez quelque chose? J'étais à la voiture juste après.
Non. Excusez-moi.
And then it fades back into her, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know what came over me then. So it's kind of like this kind of flash of anger, and the music comes back in, which is his music. So that's her thinking about him again. And it's this really grandiose, kind of powerful thing that hits her, and it really hits you as an audience.
He's very good at emoting and commanding the audience in that sense, and trying to bring about a sense of empathy, I think, in each of his films.
Yeah, and that's where Peisner's music comes in, into this, more so than any other piece of Kieślowski's work. You know, the music is a narrative point there. It couldn't have been another piece of music, really. So the general conceit is that she ends up working on his music. His music initially is a kind of reminder of him, but then it becomes...
coping mechanism, I suppose.
Yeah, it becomes a way of her finishing what he started, carrying on his life in a way. Yeah, and so she does end up finishing his music. She does end up getting over... well, not getting over his death, but she starts to grieve for him. And the last moment is we see her crying at last. So there really is a massive character arc there. And if she had cried at the beginning, it wouldn't have been as interesting, would it? She does something different, and that's why it's interesting. That's why you stay with the character in the film. Do you want to mention the cube? The sugar cube?
No, that's trivia again as well. I suppose it's a moment of...
It shows his dedication to, you know, getting it right, really, doesn't it? So, like, there's a sugar cube which Julie, the character, dips into a coffee, and it kind of sucks up the coffee.
Instantly forgettable for most people.
Yeah.
It turns out, it took hours to shoot that, because it had to be for a certain length of time.
8 sekund. To jest przynajmniej o 3 sekundy za długo. Do tego musieliśmy spreparować kostkę, która się nasączy kawą w 5 sekund. Ponieważ uważaliśmy, że nie można więcej czasu poświęcić na taki detal.
And I saw this sort of making of footage of seeing him talk about this, and I'm thinking, I used to think, you know, what a pretentious asshole. But it's about his need for perfection and getting the rehearsal right, as you said.
Yeah, because working in Poland, he didn't have a lot of money for like film stock. So what he would do was rehearse it, and then do one take, and then that was it. And then he'd move on to another one because you didn't have the budget to film loads of takes. Then when you go to France, I was listening to something Juliette Binoche was saying about...
For each scene, I had to ask for my second take.
Well, it informs his filmmaking overall. And it could well be it could well be the reason why he's so well thought of in the film world, because presumably not a lot of filmmakers work that way, you know. But even filmmakers who do come from difficult backgrounds, who can't afford to use a lot of stock, they even still have multiple takes.
It kind of enforces a well-crafted film, really, doesn't it? So you're not relying on doing things in post or getting around things, cutting corners. You kind of have to go out and do it ahead of time, plan it, and then that will create a perfect film, I think.
Co nas obchodzi jakaś idiotyczna kostka cukru, która się nasącza jakąś kretyńską kapą? Nic nas to nie obchodzi. Jeżeli nie będziemy przez chwilkę w świecie bohaterki, która po to zanurza kostkę i jej się przygląda, żeby odrzucić ofertę, którą przed chwilą otrzymała od człowieka, który ją kocha, który był zresztą przez chwilę jej kochankiem. Ona chce tę ofertę odrzucić, ona chce zapomnieć o tym człowieku, ona chce też zapomnieć o muzyce, którą cały czas słyszymy, ponieważ ta muzyka przypomina jej coś, o czym ona absolutnie nie chce pamiętać.
So Blue, White and Red, they are loosely connected as well. So Kieślowski does like this kind of wider body of work with little individual films within that. So, for instance, Blue, Julie goes into a courtroom at one point and we hear some dialogue about someone's wife.
Est-ce que seulement pour la raison que je ne m'exprime pas en français, le tribunal ne veut pas entendre mes arguments?
But then in White, his next film, we then see the inside of that courtroom and that's where that film starts.
Où est l'égalité?
Czy tylko dlatego, że nie mówię po francusku, sąd nie chce wysłuchać moich argumentów?
Polish man is summoned to a courtroom and divorced by his French wife, who he can't even speak to.
He knows like basic French, I think, but yeah, they can't really have a detailed conversation. He has to talk through an interpreter.
He's seemingly fallen in love with someone entirely based on the fact that she's beautiful.
Yeah.
And she is incredibly cruel to him.
Yeah, I was saying there's not really an antagonist in Kieślowski's films, but she is quite antagonistic, isn't she?
Yeah, yeah.
C'est tout.
It really stood out, this film, for me, compared to the other two, because maybe it's because it goes back to Poland. I don't know.
Well, for me, it was the tone. So you go through. You've been told the Three-Colour Trilogy is a fantastic, piece of art. You watch Blue first because that came out first, and that is a fantastic piece of art. And then you watch White, and it's like a silly farce. And it's just like completely tonally shift from the first film. It's like
there is a lot of white, but because it's snowing.
It's snowing, but it's just a silly plot, and there's no like powerful dramatic moments like there were in Blue.
I think there's well-directed scenes. There's a moment near the beginning when she's sort of teasing him and making him think that she's taken him back, and then she sets fire to the curtains.
Yeah.
Dans quelques instants, tous les flics de Paris seront à tes trousses. Les clés!
Before that moment, there is a lot of. I think it's very intense. I think it's very well directed, but we immediately go into this sort of farcical tragedy. Do you want to call it? It's like a Charlie Chaplin film almost.
It's kind of like an anti-comedy, really. So the main character meets a businessman who
fellow Pole as well.
Fellow Pole, and because he's out of work and he's lost his credit card or something, so he has no money and can't get back to Poland. This other guy goes, "Well, you can come back with me in a suitcase, and I will get you to kill someone for me, and I'll pay you for it." And it's just like, okay, I'll do that.
Trzeba zabić człowieka.
What? This guy I've met like straight away.
Well, he was desperate and in love. I don't know,
It's just really weird. And then he spends 4 hours on a plane in a suitcase, but then he doesn't actually get off at the other end, does he?
Yeah, because his suitcase has been stolen at the other end. And then find a man inside the suitcase.
So already you're going, what is going on? This is just a silly plot. And it's such a jarring, shift from Blue, which nothing like that happens at all. So I want to say it's the weakest of the three, but I think it's just different. And I think it's just such a shock to me when I watched it. I was just like, what? Yeah. He took a risk here, which I think most directors wouldn't. They would have played it safe. And I think this is what...
Especially when you've been told to direct a trilogy.
Yeah, and they've got a link somehow. I think not taking risks is at the detriment of cinema a lot of the time. So he took a risk here, which I don't think paid off, but that is the sort of person that he is. That's what makes you want to watch his films, I think. You kind of go, oh, I didn't really expect that to happen. I want to see where this is going.
It completes the trilogy, I suppose. So
it's there.
It's there. So
no one can say it's not there.
Might as well watch it.
T'es chez toi? T'es là? Non, t'es pas là. Bon, je rappellerai cet après-midi.
Michel, j'étais en train de prendre mon petit déjeuner.
So to complete the trilogy, you go back to France with a character called Valentine. She's in love with someone who's not there. Immediately when you watch Red, you're just hit with just tons of red. Everything she comes into contact with is red, so it's kind of like this symbol of being in love, right? And the plot is that she befriends an elderly man and who is completely bitter and twisted and doesn't want anything to do with anyone. And his house is just, there's no red at all. So you get this kind of immediate stark contrast between this young, naive woman talking to this bitter old man who's just lost all hope of humanity.
Et pour Rita?
C'est une chienne très intelligente. Vraiment. Prenez-la.
Vous ne la voulez pas?
Je ne veux rien.
Vous n'avez qu'à arrêter de respirer?
C'est une bonne idée.
One thing that is really abhorrent about him, and one thing that makes Valentine stay with him and kind of ask him, why are you doing this, is that he's been taping the telephone conversations of his neighbours and been listening in to them. So he's been spying on them.
J'espionne les conversations téléphoniques de mes voisins. Il fallait pas couper. C'était très intéressant. Ça n'a pas l'air de vous amuser.
C'est dégoûtant.
Ouais. Et en plus, c'est illégal.
And she just can't believe why he's doing this. She's like, this is horrible. You need to stop this. And he's like, all right, well, why don't you go and tell them that I'm doing this, you know? So she goes around there. Her altruistic intentions are kind of questioned at that point when she realises that if she does tell them, then she's going to be revealing this secret. She kind of bottles it, basically, and she leaves. So her kind of good intentions are just kind of crushed by this instant moral decision that she can't make. So that's when she goes back to the old man and she kind of struggles to figure out what's going on.
Pourquoi vous vous êtes arrêté? Vous n'avez pas dit à cet homme que je l'espionnais. Vous avez été prise de remords? Ou c'est seulement la peur de faire du mal?
Peut-être les deux.
Whereas another film would show this person as being quite pervy or voyeuristic, we get a sense of why he's doing this, because he used to be a judge and he's really concerned with, he let people off that might have committed crimes. And there's a nice little bit of dialogue when he's talking about a sailor that he let off for a crime, but then he found out later that he did do the crime and he's kind of always been guilty of that. And then Valentine, who's got quite a optimistic view on the world, says, well, you saved him because he didn't commit any more crimes after that. So Valentine's like, well, you made the right decision there because his life was saved and you saved him.
Vous ne pouvez pas le comprendre. Vous l'avez sauvé.
Admettons. Mais combien d'autres aurais-je pu acquitter? Même coupable.
The old guy and the young girl, they really need each other at that point in time. They really need that other aspect of how you look at the world. So he's looking at the world in a very negative way and she's very positive, and they kind of bond over that.
Also is interesting because it almost has a tragic ending.
Yeah, so there is a weird ferry sequence, which I don't particularly like this, but
do you feel it's tacked on?
Yeah,
maybe.
Because basically they go on a ferry ride and there's an accident and then only 7 people survive or something, and it just happens to be like all the characters from the other films as well.
La femme d'un célèbre compositeur français décédé l'année dernière, Julie Vignon.
Oh yeah, it's Juliette Binoche from Blue. Just like, what? Okay. Which at this point, how unlucky is she to have like 2 near fatal accidents in like, what, a year?
Yeah.
If I was her, I would never travel ever again. The whole point of the ferry sequence really was so that Valentine and her neighbour could meet and fall in love. There are parallels between him and the old guy Kern. So there is this sense of that Kern was kind of out of time, you know, he's been born out of time. And really, Valentine and him were kind of true loves, but they were just born at different time periods. And this parallel with this younger man kind of makes you hopeful that Valentine will find true love.
And in a way, Kern.
Yeah.
In a weird sort of way. It's him in the past or something. Getting that chance of falling in love that he didn't get.
Peut-être que je ne vous ai pas rencontré.
I did want to talk about a little sequence when Kern is telling Valentine about his ex-wife who died, and then they're interrupted by a guy.
Il était revenu ici.
Je ferme le théâtre. On n'est pas vu une femme avec des seaux?
You've got to kind of wait for the next bit of dialogue to happen. You know, you're interrupted by this element of mundanity. And then he finishes the story later on. It's just like, I really love things like that when they get put in films, because that is how life happens, you know, that really shows humans. And as a screenwriter, a lot of people don't put those things in. The important thing is the story amongst the reality of it.
It's as if he's sort of got this balance right between escapism and visualising a reality, and that could be because he has these two disciplines that he's come from, the documentary discipline and fiction filmmaking, that he's managed to sort of collide in an interesting way.
Après, j'ai demandé ma mise à la retraite anticipée.
Vous l'avez pas vu?
Non.
Sans arrêt, il faut lui courir après. Milana! Milana!
So after Three Colours, Kieślowski announced his retirement, and then shortly after this is when he died.
Mm-hmm.
That was such a tragedy at that point. He had so much more in him, I think. I did find out recently, though, that Kieślowski and Pieswick were working on another trilogy based on Heaven, Hell and Purgatory. So he died in the midst of doing this. So it showed that he wasn't going to give up cinema. One script was made and then the other two were kind of half made.
What order would they be in? Would it be a bit lacklustre to end on Purgatory?
Oh no, yeah, it was that.
Okay.
Interestingly, these films were finished by Pieswick and they were made. From what I can gather, there is still some Kieślowski DNA in there. But to be honest, they do lack his documentary style and his understanding of everyone is a human. They are more like Western films, I would say. Western Europe or Western America. So, any final thoughts on Kieślowski? Did you enjoy watching all his works? Do you find them mature? What do you think?
Some of them I did. It's perhaps there's not necessarily that opening hook, maybe, that you're quite used to. It's like the opposite of most Hollywood films for me, actually. Most Hollywood films start in a high and then go downhill from there.
Yeah.
And the thing that I found interesting about the Decalogue was the first episode of that. I was, not quite gripped until the end, and then my mind worked back, and suddenly I'm actually genuinely shocked and moved. And Kieślowski can usually bring that out, I think, in a lot of his films.
This is my problem with Kieślowski, is even though he's one of my favourite directors, I've always struggled to sit down and watch his films because, I don't have the energy to watch them. But then when I do, I'm just completely immersed in them, and I find that they are quite accessible. Like, I was watching Red the other day and my girlfriend came in and watched it with me. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't really like films, she likes Marvel films and things like that, but this is an art film that she was quite happy to watch and she enjoyed, with subtitles as well.
Service météo personnalisé, bonjour. J'ai appelé tout à l'heure, je pars demain en voiture à Turin. Ah oui, j'ai vérifié.
It's the perfect films in that film. because I feel like one part of my mission with this is to try and sell artistic films to muggles, to the general population, So it's always good to find a film like that that's easier to sell as a kind of gateway movie into these things,
On the surface, they're not entertaining, but the way he's crafted them is just genius, I think. Personally, he's really opened my eyes to a different way of storytelling. rather than going, oh, you need a protagonist and an antagonist to fight each other. You know, it's not all about fighting all the time. It's about people trying to figure out, oh, you have a different idea than me, you have a different moral compass, but I want to understand you. You know, and that's really interesting.
And even from a film like The Scar, right, which I didn't quite grab me, but even that, I can appreciate that it's a film not about some horrible tragedy. It's about something that happens everywhere. And I find that interesting. I find the relatability, for me, is what interests me the most about Kieślowski.
Yeah, and that's why I love him, really. He's such a unique writer more than anything else, I think. The way he approaches the subject matter is just not what you would do in the West, I think, and that's mainly what I've been exposed to, is Western films with a traditional 3-act structure, protagonist, antagonist, you know, hero's journey, crap like that. It's just nowhere to be seen in this.
Yeah, I agree. If there is an antagonist, it's an idea or a circumstance.
No i co będziesz robił teraz w życiu?
No nic, na razie siedzę na krzesełku albo na ławeczce. Mogę się wyspać porządnie. Jak się kąpię, to już się kąpię rano. I się kąpię po to, żeby żyć, a nie po to, żeby robić filmy. To jest bardzo przyjemne uczucie.
Okay, that's it for this time on Films and That. Thanks for watching and subscribing. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.